Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to dive into a healing vacation to Moc Chau, Son La, where Jack and Tu Tien finally escaped the hospital to enjoy tea hills, fruit gardens and cozy cafes. But deep inside a prison cell, Tuan is secretly teaming up with dangerous gangsters to plan a terrifying revenge. Will this peaceful trip stay happy or turn into their next nightmare? If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming videos. The night after the big family dinner, the house is finally quiet. Everyone has gone home, the dishes are stacked to dry, and a single warm lamp glows in the living room. Jack leans back on the sofa, stretching his legs. Across from him, Tu Tien hugs a pillow, hair still messy from all the auntie hugs. "You look exhausted," Jack says. Happy exhausted, but still exhausted. She smiles faintly. "Your aunt fed me like I just left the hospital yesterday." "In her mind, you did," he replies. "You survived surgery, so now you're legally required to eat for 3 people. She laughs, but her eyes drift toward the dark window, where the garden is only a shadow. "Jack," she says quietly, "I'm happy, but I still feel heavy inside." Like the worst part of the story is waiting to come back. He nods slowly. He knows that feeling too well. Some nights he still wakes up thinking he's in the hospital corridor, waiting outside the operating room. "Then maybe," he says, "we need to go somewhere that doesn't remind us of hospitals and storms." She looks at him. "Go where?" "A healing trip," he answers. "Just you and me, no doctors, no farm chores, somewhere with mountains, clean air, hot coffee and no drama." She raises an eyebrow. "Since when are you a travel planner? Is that your new niche?" "Maybe," he grins, specializing in emotional recovery tours. She leans back. "Okay, Mr. Recovery, where were you thinking?" "Moc Chau, Son La," he says. "Tea hills, fruit gardens, ethnic markets, misty mornings. People go there to heal." She's seen the photos before, rolling green slopes, little houses in the fog. The thought alone makes her chest loosen. "A healing vacation in Moc Chau," she repeats. It sounds peaceful. "It sounds like something we deserve," he says. "We've been fighting for so long. Let's take a few days just to breathe." She lets the idea settle, then finally nods. "When do we go?" "As soon as the doctor says you're okay to travel," he replies. "We'll ask nicely." The next morning, the kitchen table becomes their planning desk. A notebook sits in the middle, their teacups steam on either side. "Rule number 1, Jack says, writing. "No waking up at 5 a.m. to worry. Rule number 2, no talking about tone. Rule number 3, no feeling guilty for resting." "You can't just ban guilt," she says. "I can try," he replies. "Every time you feel guilty, I buy you a snack." She laughs. "Dangerous deal, but I accept." They make a short list: fruit garden, tea hill walk, ethnic market, coffee with a view, photos for the kids in Tan Minh, early nights, slow mornings. "Do you think we can really relax?" she asks. "What if I get sick again?" "Then we handle it," he says. "Like we always do, but until that happens, we live." A week later, backpacks are packed with warm clothes and snacks. Jack locks the farmhouse door. Tu Tien pulls her scarf tighter around her neck. "I can carry something heavier," she says. "You can carry the playlist," he answers. "VIP guests don't lift things." On the bus heading north, the city melts into rice fields, then hills, then higher mountains. Tu Tien leans on the window, watching the landscape change. "I forgot how beautiful this country is," she murmurs. Easy to forget when you're staring at IV bags, Jack says softly. The air cools as the bus climbs. When they step off in Moc Chau, a soft mist hangs over everything. Their homestay sits on a slope above rows of tea bushes, wooden and simple. The owner, a woman in a thick sweater, smiles. "You must be Jack and Tu Tien. Come in, rest. I'll make tea." They sit on the porch with steaming cups. In front of them, tea hills roll like waves. "How do you feel?" Jack asks. "Like my head is finally quiet," she says. "In a good way." "Good," he replies. Mission Healing Trip officially started. While mist wraps the hills, morning in another world begins with whistles and metal doors. In prison, Tuan stands in line for roll call, cold air biting at his skin. The routine is always the same: numbers, orders, hard labor. But his thoughts are far from the yard. Rumors travel faster than time. A guard mentions a lucky guy whose wife survived some rare illness. Another inmate repeats a cousin's story. A couple from a farm planning a healing trip to Moc Chau after a long stay in hospital. No names, but Tuan doesn't need them. Jack, Tu Tien. During a break, he sits on a concrete step, staring at the pale sky. Scar, the inmate with a thin line across his jaw, sits down beside him. "Heard something?" Scar says casually. "Your old rival's doing great. Girl survived. Farm's alive. Now they're off to Moc Chau to chill." Tuan's jaw tightens. "So what?" "So you're in here breaking your back," Scar says, "and he's out there drinking coffee in the clouds. Doesn't that bother you?" "What can I do?" Tuan mutters. "I already tried once. I lost. He walked away." "You attacked him yourself," Scar replies. "Big mistake. Real damage is done quietly by people no one can trace back to you." Tuan looks at him. "And you know those people?" "I know how to reach them," Scar says. "This place is full of connections. You don't need your own hands. You just need a name, a place, and a promise you'll pay what it's worth when you're free." Tuan doesn't answer, but the idea settles, dark and heavy. Back in Moc Chau, the next morning is cool and bright. Jack and Tu Tien walk slowly between fruit trees, each holding a small basket. Her steps are careful, but stronger than before. "Don't stretch too far," he says as she reaches up. "If I fall, you'll catch me," she replies. "That's in your job description." He smiles. "I should have read the contract more carefully." She plucks a ripe plum and takes a bite. Juice runs down her fingers. She laughs, wiping it away. "This tastes like freedom," she says quietly. For now, all they see is fruit, mist, and each other. They don't see the invisible thread already stretching from a peaceful hill in Moc Chau to a crowded cell, where a man with too much time and too much anger is quietly beginning to weave a plan around their names. Morning in Moc Chau feels like waking up in a different life. Cool air slips through the window as Jack pulls the curtain aside. Tea hills roll under a thin layer of mist. On the bed, Tu Tien stretches before sitting up. "Still alive?" Jack asks. "Disappointed?" she teases. "You're stuck with me." They eat a quick breakfast on the homestay terrace, while the owner insists they need extra strength for the hills. "Day 2 of our healing trip," Jack says. "Today, we actually walk the hills instead of just staring at them." "You make it sound like a mission," Tu Tien replies. "It is," he grins. "Final boss, trusting your body again." A narrow dirt path leads between rows of tea. Jack lets her set the pace, staying close. "You okay?" he asks. "If you keep asking that," she warns, "I'm rolling you down this hill." "So that's a yes," he says. She listens to her breathing. Every time my heart speeds up, my brain asks if I'm getting sick again, she admits. Then we keep walking, he answers, until your brain learns this is just living. They reach a lookout where the valley opens before them. Tea fields curve around the slopes. Small houses peek through pockets of fog. If you could talk to Hospital You, Jack asks, what would you say? I'd tell her she was right to be scared, Tu Tien says. But I'd also tell her that one day she'd stand here with the idiot who wouldn't leave, and it'd be worth holding on. So I'm officially worth it, he says. Temporarily, she answers, smiling. They sit on a flat rock, letting the wind and silence wrap around them. No machines, no lawyers, no Tuan. Far away, quiet is impossible. In the prison yard, doors slam, voices bark orders. Tuan shoulders a crate, sweat soaking his collar. On the outside, he's just another inmate. Inside, his thoughts won't stop. Last night, Scar slipped him a folded note. No names, just a code and a line. Ready when you are. Details? Now, during a short break, Scar drops beside him along the wall. Well, Scar murmurs. You decide. Tuan keeps his eyes on the ground. Jack has a small farm outside town, he says. He works with poor kids. He never abandons them. He always goes back. Scar nods. Patterns. Good. The woman? Her name is Tu Tien, Tuan says. She was supposed to die. She didn't. They're in Moc Chau now. Tea hills, fruit gardens, cafes. He thinks this is their happy chapter. Men like that are easy, Scar says. You don't hit him directly. You hit what he loves, where he feels safest. I don't want chaos, Tuan mutters. No guns, no headlines. I want him to feel what I felt, his world turning against him piece by piece. That's the service, Scar replies. You stay here, keep your hands clean, other people move. And when I get out, Tuan asks. Then you pay, Scar says. Money, favors, whatever you've got left. You said you'd give anything. This is anything. Jack got his miracle. The woman survived. The farm lived. Now they get mountain air. Do it, Tuan says finally. Make sure he knows what it feels like to lose peace after thinking he's safe. Scar stands. Message sent, he says. Back on the mountain, afternoon light warms the slopes. Jack and Tu Tien wander a small fruit garden. Baskets in hand, they move between plum and orange trees. The owner keeps saying, taste first, buy later. If we lived here, Tu Tien says, juice on her fingers, I'd never stop eating. You almost died, Jack replies. Unlimited fruit is allowed. You can't use that line forever, she says. Watch me, he answers. They return to the ethnic market. Sellers greet them with nods now. They choose tea for Vin, a scarf for Mai, notebooks and candy for the kids in Tan Min. This is for when we visit next, Tu Tien says, dropping bracelets into Jack's bag. I want them to see our story kept going. And didn't stop at Tuan, he adds. She nods. Exactly. As the sun drops, they find a tiny cafe on a hill. Coffee, view, quiet. Inside, a few tables, warm light, the smell of beans. They take the window seat. The valley below shifts from green to deep blue. For the first time in a long time, Tu Tien says, holding her cup, I don't feel like I'm stealing happiness. I feel like maybe we're allowed to have it. We've earned it, Jack replies. I'm done apologizing for being happy with you. She studies him. If my illness comes back or the past finds us again, will you ever regret this life with me? No, he says. I didn't choose you for an easy life. I chose you for all of it. If the only joy we get is days like this between storms, I'll still choose you. Her eyes glisten, but she smiles. Then let's remember this day, she whispers, in case the next storm comes. Night settles over Moc Chau. At the homestay, Jack lies awake a little longer, listening to Tu Tien's breathing and the faint sound of crickets. "We'll protect this," he murmurs, fingers brushing hers under the blanket. In the cell block, night is harsher. Lights buzz, distant shouts echo. Scar sits on his bunk, a cheap phone cupped low in his hands. "Yeah," he whispers. "That's the name, that's the town. He always goes back to his farm, always keeps his word, always shows up for the same kids. Build around that. Make it look like bad luck, not revenge." The voice on the other end answers. Scar nods. "No rush," he adds. "Slow is fine. Slow hurts more." He ends the call, hides the phone, and lies down. Across from him, Tuan stares at the ceiling. "Well?" he asks. "It's moving," Scar says. "You won't know when or how, but sooner or later something in his world is going to crack." Tuan closes his eyes, picturing Jack laughing on some quiet road, believing the worst is behind him. For the first time since the verdict, he feels a twisted sense of control return. High in the mountains, Jack and Tu Tien drift into sleep, convinced this trip marks the beginning of a softer chapter. They don't know that beyond the tea hills and warm lights, their names have already become part of someone else's plan. A plan that doesn't shout, doesn't rush, and doesn't forget. After a warm family dinner, Jack and Tu Tien decide to take a healing trip to Moc Chau, Ly to finally breathe after surgery, hospitals, and storms. They stay at a small homestay, walk slowly through misty tea hills, visit fruit gardens, shop at the ethnic market, and spend quiet evenings in cozy cafes, learning to trust their bodies and their happiness again. For the first time in a long time, they allow themselves to believe that maybe life is giving them a second chance. Meanwhile, inside a cold, crowded prison, Tuan refuses to let go of his hatred. Through a ruthless inmate, he secretly reaches out to gangsters on the outside and starts building a silent revenge plan targeting Jack's peaceful new life. The more healed and relaxed Jack and Tu Tien become, the closer hidden danger quietly approaches.